Welcome, everyone, to the Timmy Talks podcast. I'm Nick Marston here with my friend and co-host David Berg, and on today's show, we'll be joined by interventional cardiologist and master educator Dr. Doug Drachman to discuss the upcoming ACC Scientific Sessions in Atlanta. Well, David, I want to start by acknowledging that you and I are celebrating our 1-year anniversary of podcasting today.
It's a big anniversary.
It is. And, I didn't get you a card, but just wanted to let you know that we were I was at least thinking about you.
Yeah, the flowers on the way from me. They'll be there in a couple of days.
Thank you very much. Our first episode was the ACC preview episode last year, and that's when we introduced the Timmy Talks podcast, discussed some of the upcoming trials that we were excited about at last year's ACC. And so, today we're going to do the same. So we've come a long way since then. You may recall when we were recapping 2023, I mentioned we had listeners across 16 countries. We're up to 32 countries now, so not bad for a doubling time. Yeah.
Awesome.
And to celebrate the occasion, we're going to be holding a Timmy Talks meetup at ACC on Sunday, 11 a.m. Kate, correct me if I'm wrong about this, but 11 to noon at the Timmy booth, which is in the expo hall. That's during a time where it's kind of the open expo is going on anyways, and stop on by. We'll have coffee, pastries. We'll even have Timmy Talk swag, which I believe was one of David's New Year's resolutions for the podcast.
Yeah, no, I am incredibly excited about this. Not only to meet people who I may or may not know already, but to push the swag. I'm very pumped about this.
Yes.
And in case you didn't catch it, there is going to be food and drinks there. So definitely make your way towards the Timmy booth on Sunday at 11 a.m.
Yeah, so we're excited about that, and we're also excited to mix things up a bit today. So rather than take a deep dive into a clinical trial, which we'll do plenty of post-ACC, we thought it'd be fun to bring on the chair of the ACC Scientific Sessions to give us a behind-the-scenes look at this year's conference and what to expect in Atlanta.
Yep, that's exactly right. So today we're bringing on, as you heard, Dr. Doug Drachman, who is somebody who Nick and I both respect very much and are lucky enough to have had the chance to work with previously. So Dr. Drachman was a former Brigham resident, I'll say, but really has spent his career as an interventional cardiologist at Massachusetts General Hospital. And he's really been a leading educator within the cardiovascular community there. He served as both the program director for the Interventional Cardiology Fellowship, as well as the General Cardiovascular Disease Fellowship, which is how Nick and I each met him. And he now serves as the director of education within the MGH Heart Center. At a national level, he's really been a leader in the American College of Cardiology, including chairing this year's annual scientific sessions. So with that, let's go ahead and bring Doug on the show.
Well, welcome to the podcast, Doug. It's really great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for including me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Nick. It is awesome to have you on the show. And so thank you for making the time. I was thinking before today that really both of us first worked with you when we were fellows rotating at MGH, and you were the program director at the time, not just of the Interventional Cardiology Fellowship, but also of the General Cardiovascular Disease Fellowship. And so you've had this really kind of amazing career as a master clinician, a thought leader, an educator, and now chair of the ACC Scientific Sessions. And so we're going to pick your brain in a moment about all the exciting science and education happening at this particular scientific sessions. But before we get into that, we'd love to hear a little bit more about how your career path evolved in the way that it did.
Thanks so much for posing that question and for your really kind comments. I remember you both as fellows, and of course, you're also superstars in my mind. So thank you for that. I've been interested in educating others really throughout all of my professional career. I can remember when I was a medical student down at Duke, in my residency and fellowship at the Brigham, always tried to participate in sort of informal educational opportunities. And then when I joined the faculty at MGH, I was asked to help design a curriculum, a series of lectures really for the fellows who are rotating through the cath lab. And that's really where I kind of got started thinking about a more formal educational curriculum and putting together faculty who had various areas of expertise and really kind of teaching to educational gaps of my learners. And I think that was a very formative experience for me. After that, I was really fortunate. I was asked to help as an associate program director for the Interventional Cardiology Fellowship, which I started probably 16 or 17 years ago and eventually became the Interventional Fellowship Program Director. And in the midst of that, there was a need for a fellowship program director, and I was really fortunate to be invited to serve in that role. And I think working with fellows, establishing sort of best practices for delivering clinical care and helping to find where are the critical areas of need for education has always been something that's fascinated me. And it's just so practical, hands-on, and immediate as a fellowship program director that I think I've always borrowed from those experiences throughout my career. In 2018, I was really lucky in that we were looking to expand our educational objectives in the Heart Center here at MGH. And so I was appointed the first ever director of education for the Heart Center. And we have a sort of number of sort of strategic objectives with our educational efforts. First and foremost, I think we attempt to elevate our levels of clinical expertise and innovation and bring those to members of our community. So we have established a number of recurring symposia that are CME accredited that face outward for other clinicians and cardiovascular professionals in our community. You may have seen just recently, John Salick and colleagues directed a symposium focused on pericarditis. We're about to put on a sort of joint symposium on heart failure and mechanical circulatory support. Dave Dudzinski in the past has put together a symposium focused on critical care cardiology. Members of our surgery departments and cardiology division have focused on a symposium on aortic disease. Now the late Dolph Hutter had multiple decades running a course entitled The Updates in Clinical Cardiology that now Rory Weiner and Emily Lau direct, that has been an annual sort of stalwart favorite that attracts hundreds of attendees. We've had a focus on women's heart health, others on structural and valvular heart disease, and we have a lot more planned for the future. So it's just been, for me, a really great sort of arc of a career in learning about education, how to kind of meet the needs of the audience and how to deliver the best that we can. Our goals now are continuing to pivot, trying to face more of our community of patients to raise health awareness and recognize cardiovascular disease, and to elevate the level of care among the clinicians with whom we practice, so we deliver best outcomes for our patients. And that's really the goal of all of this. But I appreciate your asking this question.
No, it's really interesting to hear that background. And obviously, education has been such a focus at MGH, especially, and not just internally, but like you said, outwardly and nationwide, even worldwide. And you've been a big part of that. And even as David said, in our training, and whether it was in the cath lab when we were first learning how to perform coronary angiograms, or kind of broader in didactic sessions when we were over there. So, really, you've really had a large impact on a lot of trainees. And I'm curious to hear kind of how your exposure to ACC kind of weaves into this. What made you gravitate towards ACC initially, and how did you first get involved with the ACC?
It was really interesting. In around 2010, 2011, I heard from one of my lifelong mentors, Pat O'Gara, that there was a program called the Emerging Faculty Program that was developed within the ACC. I think it had happened, one session prior to the one to which I applied. It was done every 2 years. And this is an educator skills workshop. So I applied and was fortunate to be accepted into that program, where I worked very closely with Pat O'Gara, with Rick Nishimura, with other educational experts at ACC. And that was like a boot camp for educators. And I found it incredibly formative. It was challenging. I remember it felt like I kind of twisted my brain into knots, kind of rethinking about how to plan an educational session backwards, thinking about what you want people to be able to do at the end, and thinking about how do you get from point A to then point Z, so people will be able to learn what it is that you hope to direct them to do. And that symposium that I participated in was incredibly helpful for me. I also had the chance, through that experience, to meet other thought leaders in education. There were many people like myself who are kind of relatively early to mid-career, who are really primarily focused on education. And these people have been become some of my closest friends and colleagues throughout the professional societies really since that time. And then finally, through the Emerging Faculty Program, it really was like a springboard or a pipeline to become involved in ACC volunteer efforts. Like, I don't think I really knew that these opportunities had existed, but you can join and volunteer for ACC committees. And for me, it started with one called the Competency Management Committee, where we were focused on really thinking critically about what are the specific competencies that cardiologists should know and be able to do. And this is, both through fellowship training, but also along the kind of continuum of lifelong learning. So that was really incredibly helpful experience for me. I then was invited to lead the faculty development work group that was focused on ways to help recruit and develop highly competent and proficient faculty within volunteer organizations of the ACC. I participated in the curriculum design committee thereafter, which is kind of the inner workings of ACC's education, where we focused on proposals for educational symposia, and we helped to critique and guide those and ultimately select which ones ACC wanted to promote. So it was fascinating for me to see what criteria are applied and how we try to forecast what's going to be effective and really hit the mark for the community that is in search of education. And then other committees that I had the opportunity to participate in. I feel incredibly gratified to have been selected to lead the Scientific Session Planning Committee. It's a 4-year commitment. I started this 4 years ago, initially as the vice chair with Pam Morris, who was the chair for the first 2 years. And I really learned from her tutelage, but also through the experience of going through this process. And then for the past 2 years, I've worked very closely with Katie Berlacher as the vice chair. And we also work with cardiovascular team leads Jean Linderbaum in the first 2 years, and now Kim Gabon for these next 2 years. And that's just been incredibly formative for me. I think this is probably one of the most important experiences in my career, and certainly as an educator, just like an absolute bedrock for me.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, congratulations. I can echo Nick's sentiment that we know firsthand that you're how good of an educator you are, and so this is incredibly well deserved, and I think a perfect cherry on top of an amazing career as an educator. And listening to you, I think that there's probably some combination of opportunity and really also being, I think, systematic and thinking rigorously about how to do education well. That I think has probably set you up for a lot of these things. I'm also really excited to hear that you endorse the Emerging Faculty program so strongly. I'm actually, I just learned about it actually in the last year or so, and I'm going to be participating this year.
Oh, congratulations!
Yeah,
that is awesome. Well. Congrats. That's going to be a great opportunity. So glad.
Yeah, very excited. So, I mean, and maybe this kind of foreshadows my next question for you, which is, a lot of the people who listen to this podcast are younger, podcast trend younger. So either junior faculty or trainees, residents, fellows. And so, what advice would you give them in terms of, not necessarily everybody has to be Doug Drachman, but what's the sort of best way to get involved in ACC now, do you think?
I think that first and foremost, be aware that there are opportunities to volunteer. And so if you check on acc.org, you will find a portal where you can submit and self-nominate to participate in committees. And there are many committees that are focused on education, but there are also committees that are focused on governance or advocacy, and a variety of other ways that you can engage with the ACC, depending on what is your particular interest or potential future career focus. Definitely, as a fellow in training or as an early career professional, you can join the FIT/early career member section. That's kind of a great opportunity to get involved and or participating in other member sections that are focused on your clinical interest. If you're an electrophysiologist or an interventional cardiologist like myself, there are member sections where you can get involved. And these really represent opportunities to be engaged, but also ultimately to rise to leadership if you wish to participate in affecting change within our community.
Well, that's good. Well, now I need to put my application in for this program because I'm feeling left out. So,
Yeah, definitely.
Well, let's shift now to the upcoming ACC Scientific Sessions in Atlanta. We'd love to kind of hear more about what it's like behind the scenes putting together such a large conference. And like you said, it sounds like it's started quite some time ago, but would be really interesting to hear kind of how you planned for such a massive endeavor.
Yeah, it's been fascinating. Over the past 4 years, I've learned a lot about this. First, the most important thing to mention is that this is just like it's the coordination of an enormous team, incredibly talented team. I mentioned that I've been working really closely with Katie Berlacher, Kim Gabone, and the ACC staff are just so extraordinary. I mean, they're so constantly professional, totally unflappable. And there's a lot of detail that goes into planning this, and you just do it in small segments, and it's a pretty well choreographed sequence of events. We oversee a planning committee of over 100 cardiovascular professionals who all contribute to this. The process starts actually a year and a half in advance. So we started planning ACC 24 in December of, I guess it was, I think it's like 22, if I've done the math right, but it's 18 months in advance. And, you start with global strategy of what we're trying to focus on, and then pass the message to the hundreds of volunteers who are all coordinated into what we call topic working groups. And there are 11 of these that are focused on the clinical areas of interest. And then, they work to put together the curriculum, and we convene as a group. We kind of interface with them independently over the course of that year and a half as they're thinking it through and planning it. But then we kind of meet as a group in July to go over what is planned for the curriculum. So this past summer, we discussed what we thought would be an ACC 24 and had a chance to kind of debrief, think it through, make sure that there's no redundancy, think about other kind of creative opportunities that folks have come up with, and then share the best practices. And our goal is for this to be a really unique and engaging educational environment. We want there to be something for everyone, so that no matter what your interest is or what your background is, you'll find something that's intriguing to you. And we increasingly try to focus on the ACC strategic pillars. And of course, in the forefront and the front of our minds is to make sure that this is a truly diverse and inclusive experience. So there's something for everyone, but also there's opportunity for everybody to be engaged, to be heard, to be seen, and to provide care to all of our patients. Our primary objectives are that we have actionable knowledge, and that is like you get something out of it, you take it home, you implement it into your practice when you get home, and it changes the way you see things or the way that you treat your patients. That's a home run for us, and we're always open to feedback. So for any of this stuff, if you have ideas or you're thoughtful about what you think you'd like to see, or something really resonated with you at ACC 24, please drop us a line and let us know, because this is how we plan it every year. We're always, kind of looking for new ways to see things and to teach things.
Well, after such a huge buildup and so much energy that's gone into this, you must be pretty excited that it's almost here. And so, I guess we would love to hear what you're most excited about for this year's ACC. This is obviously a clinical trials, cardiovascular clinical trials oriented podcast, but we'll accept any answers. Is there anything that we should be keeping an eye out for in particular, or something that is particularly exciting about this scientific sessions?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot. We definitely are excited. That's like a total understatement. I think we're bursting at the seams. So it's just like totally counting down the days. And it's crazy, when you think about a year and a half of planning, that it's actually almost upon us. It's just surreal. So we're super excited. I think, as you mentioned, I think the science is just at the top of the pyramid for us. We're definitely very excited for, the information to be released. There are over 300 educational sessions, so many opportunities for people to network. And, it's just great also to be in Atlanta. And a curious detail of this year is that this is actually the 75th anniversary of the American College of Cardiology this year. So there's going to be a lot of built-in kind of celebration you'll see there as well. I think in terms of like in terms of the science, and I don't know that I totally understand this trend, over the past 3 years or so, we have seen increasing numbers of submissions of abstracts. And between last year and this year, we actually had 15% more abstracts just this year over last.
Wow.
This is like clearly the greatest number since 2004. And that was like the first year where I saw a counting of this. So it is just, and it's not, all the stuff is highly selective. Any of these things could be well presented and incorporated. So it's very difficult to make decisions about what we can include because there's a finite amount of space and time. So I would say, at the top, when you ask what I'm most excited about, I think, the late breaking clinical trials are always just so immediate, so exciting. It's hot off the press and has opportunity really to change practice. So I'm going to certainly be tuned right after the opening showcase for the first 3 late breaking clinical trials, which are the Relieve HF trial, the Impact MI trial, and the Aegis 2. Relieve HF is focused on the insertion of an intra-atrial shunt for individuals with heart failure, whether it's with preserved or reduced ejection fraction. Impact MI is examining the use of empagliflozin, an SGLT2 inhibitor, in patients with myocardial infarction. So this is one scenario, not yet previously identified as an advantage for SGLT2 inhibitors, and I'm excited to see that. And then Aegis 2 is looking at the compound CSL112, which is an ApoA1 analog, which basically controls cholesterol efflux, and the impact of this medication for individuals also with acute MI. So I think those are some of the kind of just the lead off, off the bat, and certainly there are many other clinical trials I'd be happy to talk about. Otherwise, though, the meeting has a lot of other stuff. We have a real focus on simulation and education through simulation. We have 13 simulators that'll be present in the hands-on sessions. There's actually going to be an escape room where you sort of learn, you have to kind of pass through the rungs, if you will, to get to the next rooms and escape from the room. And it's all focused on kind of cath lab and team-based strategies. I think that's going to be really fun and creative. And I really applaud Matt Martinez, Chris Keen, and their team who put all this stuff together. I think that'll be great. But also, and this has been a real strategic focus of ours for the past several years, we really hear a lot from the attendees that they really like the informal education, like these sort of chance encounters where they can learn stuff like at the heart-to-heart stage, which is sort of like this open format, usually a dialogue, not a lot of slides. You can kind of come and go and check in. A lot of interaction between the audience and the panelists. This is all in the Lounge and Learn Pavilion, and there's a lot of educational sessions that happen in the actual lounges as well. One other thing that's unique to ACC 24, every year we have what's called an intensive, and usually we focus on some clinical area of interest. And last year, you may recall, it was the focus on critical care cardiology that was developed by Rob Roswell and Dave Dudzinski. But it's usually 2 sessions that are 75 minutes long, focused on a clinical topic. But this year, we have decided to dedicate 4 sessions because we think that this topic is so critically important for everybody. This topic is the business of cardiology. Allison Bailey and Ty Gluckman have chaired the development of these sessions, and it looks absolutely outstanding to me. And it's going to focus on a lot of, kind of critical aspects that everybody should know. You don't have to be a hospital administrator to appreciate this. You could be in private practice, you could be a fellow in training, you could be a seasoned clinician at an academic center. I think that, the field is evolving so dramatically, and these are not things that we're often taught about in our fellowship. So a lot of practical knowledge, how to negotiate a salary, what compensation models look like, how hospitals are reimbursed for services that are provided, how to work as a team, how to lead, just so many great, what we call kind of non-clinical competencies to learn about. So that's something that I'm also incredibly excited about. Then the kind of last educational thing I want to talk about is just, April Adventure. That's the new terminology. Last year, if you went to ACC, you saw something called March Matchup. We were really sort of inspired by the NCAA and created a new kind of educational format that's almost like a game room setting. It has a lot of debates, a lot of opportunities for kind of teams to try to answer in a quiz show format. And the audience really got engaged. I think people really like that. So this year, we had to change the title, of course, because it's not happening in March, although the NCAA is certainly well heated up right now.
Yep.
I won't tell all of my allegiances, but I am a big fan of the Duke Blue Devils, of course.
I figured.
So yeah,
Arizona Wildcats are in the Sweet 16 too.
So it's super exciting. So, but April Adventure, I think, promises to be really terrific. So, and in all the planning, we've tried to, we have I think there's over 1,500 faculty who are represented. We have 200 international faculty. We're super focused on it being diverse and inclusive. There's a health equity hub that you'll find in the Expo Center. Certainly for fellows in training, Fit Jeopardy is just, when we're talking NCAA, this is the most exciting competition. So, be there to root on your teams. I think that'll be great. And then, curiously, I will say as the program chair, one of the top questions I'm asked as I'm walking through the convention center is, where do I find the puppies? Everybody wants to know about the puppies. They will be in the Expo Center. Never fear. The puppies are backed by popular demand. So I think it's going to be awesome. So there's a lot of stuff to be excited about. Some of it's, fun and along the way, and others of it are serious science and other things. But hopefully, I think there will be opportunities for everybody to find something that they like.
Absolutely. So much great content and entertainment and something for everyone, truly something for everybody. So, it reminds me of my first ACC meeting, which was back when I was a medical student. And, sometimes, especially early on in our careers, these large meetings can be a bit overwhelming, for first time attendees and whatnot. How do you kind of recommend or guide a trainee or fellow to approach getting the most out of these 3-day sessions?
Yeah, I think it's best to go in with a plan, I guess. First, I think the ACC 24 app, which you can download from the App Store, is awesome. It's very easy to navigate. I'm trying to kind of post some stuff on Twitter X right now just about how to use it as well, but it's pretty self-explanatory. But you can use filters and look in separate areas to identify what's your clinical area of interest. Are there pathways that you're curious about? There are highlighted sessions. And so, or you can just kind of browse it day by day to see what's going on. And all you have to do when you're using the app is if you see a session that's interesting to you, you just sort of press it on your PDA and it will, if you hold for a second, it'll add it to your calendar. And so I would just advise that you do that. And then there's a way, if you're interested, you can share your calendar with your friends by using an export function that's just in the menu. So you can export and say hey, these look cool to me. What do you think? And then you can kind of share your ideas. But my advice is, look at that before you get there. Because once you're there, if you're just saying what's happening right now, where should I go? It can be a little bit overwhelming to try to figure it out right at the spur of the moment. And if you have a plan, you don't have to follow the plan, but just have an idea of what you think you want to hit. I would suggest sampling a bit of everything. You don't have to just focus on one area, but there's going to be a lot of interesting things. I try to highlight it in this conversation. And then you can just kind of move around and see it. One thing that's really cool that we did also last year is that you can stream any of the sessions while you're in the convention center. So if you're at the opposite end of the convention center, you can listen over the convention center's Wi-Fi to another lecture that's happening at the same time. So definitely bring your earbuds so you can be doing that. Maybe you're walking from point A to point B and you can hear what's going on until you get there. Or if you're at the moderated poster session, which is in the expo and it's right next to the Fit Jeopardy going on, you can put in your earbuds and you can kind of listen that way too. So it can have a little bit of sound specificity so you can hear what you're trying to listen to. And also don't sweat it. If there's something you wanted to see and you missed it, all this is being recorded for ACC Anywhere. And if you pay to register, you have access to ACC Anywhere, and it becomes available just a few weeks after the meeting, so you can watch anything that you missed as well. But I think, final advice for fellows in training, I think just try to be present, spend time with colleagues, introduce yourself. People are really accessible, really approachable. And I think you'll find, year after year, if you attend these meetings, it'll become a rarity that you walk down the hallway without seeing somebody that you recognize. It might start off very daunting. You know, there's 17, 18,000 people expected to come, maybe more. And it seems daunting as you walk down the hallway, but you start to see more and more faces that you recognize, and you get to know people better. And then it's almost like the cardiology community almost seems to shrink, even though it's a very vast, you know, international global community. You start to see people you recognize. And this is really, I think, the magic of it. It's, you know, the opportunity to network, the opportunity to build relationships, to, you know, sometimes develop collaborations for research or clinical care, and really to learn from one another. Like, we put together an agenda and we have the curriculum there, but it really then behooves the attendee to extract what it is that they want of it, and to kind of internalize it by, you know, kind of, you know, paying it forward or sharing it with others who you're around, or talking about how other people do it, because that's where you can learn how to kind of really implement things when you get back home. So I hope that's a reasonable, you know, accessible way to describe how I would recommend attending the meeting, but everybody has their own best way.
No, totally. I think I love those words of wisdom. I love the practical tips in there. And I have to say, you covered so much. I mean, this was like an awesome movie preview where you leave and you definitely you're ready to watch the movie right then and there. And fortunately, we don't have to wait that long because ACC is right around the corner. But you did such a fantastic job of setting the stage. So thanks again for making the time to chat with us today. Can't wait. It's going to be awesome. And congratulations to you on being almost across the finish line.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, maybe like a movie preview, I didn't spoil the ending, so there's going to be a lot of stuff that's still under embargo that hopefully will be super exciting for people to experience in real time with us all. I'm so grateful to have had the chance to speak with you guys here today. Thank you so much for including me, and I hope everybody has safe travels. I'd love to see you all in Atlanta. Feel free to ping me, look me up, say hello when you're there. I'd love to say hi and have a chance to meet. So thanks so much.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Doug. Great talking to you.
Likewise.
Well, that was awesome. I love Doug, and I thought he really gave a fantastic overview of the conference highlights.
Absolutely. And I'm glad he mentioned the app because, you know, I had previously been overwhelmed by conferences. I know when I was younger, and just in the last couple of years have really used the app to plan ahead and set a schedule beforehand, which I just did earlier this week. So I'm certainly excited for it.
Yeah, I think a little planning goes a long way in terms of making it an effective conference and getting the most out of it. So I guess speaking of your app and your planning, I guess we can start with Saturday. How does your Saturday look?
Yeah, for sure. So Saturday morning, obviously the big opening session, opening showcase, as they call it, I'll definitely be attending. Actually, Doug, as the chair of the ACC, will be presenting along with the president of the ACC, Hadley Wilson. So I like to go to those. They're usually entertaining. And then that's immediately followed by the first late-breaking session, which has 3 exciting trials. I know you're interested in a couple in particular. Do you want to tee up Impact MI?
Yeah. So Impact MI is going to be an important study. You know, the SGLT2 inhibitor story has really been one of the great success stories in cardiovascular medicine over the last decade or so. But one of the areas where we really have relatively limited data for SGLT2 inhibitors is in acute manifestations of cardiovascular disease. So that includes patients with acute decompensated heart failure, but also acute MI. And so at AHA in 2023, we saw the primary results of the DAPA-MI trial, which was a study of dapagliflozin in acute MI. And it had a bit of an interesting study design. It was a registry-based RCT that was integrated into 2 national clinical quality registries, one in Sweden and then one in the UK. And when that trial was designed, the initial primary endpoint was a traditional clinical composite of cardiovascular death or hospitalization for heart failure. But during the conduct of the trial, they realized that the event rate was much lower than anticipated. And so that was obviously going to compromise the power to detect a difference in clinical endpoints. And so they ended up pivoting to a hierarchical composite endpoint that included cardiometabolic outcomes like weight loss and new onset type 2 diabetes, which was analyzed using a win ratio. And so in the end, the trial was positive, but the effect was really on these metabolic components of the primary endpoint. We really didn't see much effect on any of the hard cardiovascular outcomes like recurrent MI or heart failure hospitalization. So I think the jury is still sort of out on the role of SGLT2 inhibitors in acute MI. And MPACT, which is a MPACT-MI, which is a placebo-controlled trial of empagliflozin in acute MI, enrolled more than 6,000 patients with acute MI who are at high risk for heart failure. So they either had heart failure symptoms or had LV dysfunction during their index hospitalization. And for this study, the primary endpoint is the composite, traditional clinical composite of time to first heart failure hospitalization or all-cause mortality. And so for the first time, I think we'll really have a trial assessing hard cardiovascular outcomes in this particular clinical context.
Yeah, that'd be huge, right? To have the hard outcomes and have significance in the post-MI population would really move the needle. So
Yeah.
That'll be a big one. Another one in the session that I'm interested in is the AEGIS-2 trial. So this is looking at enhancing cholesterol efflux using ApoA1 compound in patients post-MI. We already know from the top-line results that the trial did not meet its primary endpoint, so I won't spend too much time discussing the details. But I do think it'll be interesting just to hear more about what we learn about the science and the biology of HDL and whether cholesterol efflux should continue to be pursued for drug therapies and in trials. So I think, while not a positive trial, we already know that it will be providing us with a lot of information. And then the third in the session is Relief HF. What should we be looking for in this trial, David?
Yeah, so this is, I think, an interesting one. It's not a pharmacotherapy. It is a procedural intervention, and really, it's a different paradigm, I think, than many other standard heart failure therapies. So, Relieve HF is a randomized trial of an interatrial shunt, specifically the V-wave interatrial shunt, and it's looking at the impact of atrial shunts, or this particular interatrial shunt, on clinical outcomes and heart failure-related health status in patients with symptomatic heart failure across the spectrum of left ventricular ejection fraction. And so the idea is that, the unifying clinical feature of heart failure is elevation in left atrial pressures, which then, of course, gets transmitted back into the pulmonary vasculature and contributes to heart failure-related symptoms. And so the question is whether if you create a left to right shunt to offload the left atrium to reduce left atrial pressure, can that mitigate symptoms and improve outcomes? And so there have been several companies that have created these intraatrial shunts that are in various phases of clinical development. And so far, we don't have a clear success story from a placebo-controlled trial. The largest study to date was the Reduce LAPHF2 trial, which was published in The Lancet a couple years ago. That assessed the Corvia interatrial shunt in patients with HFpEF specifically, and it failed to demonstrate a clinical benefit of the device. But there was this subgroup analysis that suggested a potential benefit if patients did not have pulmonary vascular disease or RV dysfunction. So thinking about Relieve HF, there's some important differences between Relieve HF and Reduce LAPHF2. Specifically, the V-wave device creates a smaller shunt than was used in Reduce LAPHF2 with the Corvia valve. It's 5 millimeters in diameter as opposed to 8 millimeters in diameter. So that may be safer. This sort of might be just the right size. That's what the investigators are certainly hoping. But the other big thing is the population's different. So it includes REF patients in addition to PEF patients. So I think as a field, this hypothesis is very much alive, a lot of interest in this space, and we'll definitely learn a lot more from Relieve HF this meeting.
That is an exciting one for sure, and would be a game changer in how we practice. We're so focused on GDMT, quadruple therapy. If we are able to add this, that'd be incredible. Well, then I think, I'll just finish with moving on to Sunday, some things I'm excited about. It's the second late breaker session. It's at 8 a.m. Sunday morning, and it's really focused on prevention. And so I think the highlight of it really is there's a lot of novel therapies that are being presented at different phases, mostly kind of phase 2. One is zilebesiran. This is an siRNA against angiotensinogen for blood pressure lowering. So we've seen RNA therapies used a lot already for lipid lowering against a number of targets. But now to move on to using RNA therapies for lowering blood pressure, I think is really exciting. There's a new PCSK9 inhibitor being presented. And then two drugs, olezarsen and plozasiran, an ASO and siRNA that both target ApoC3 for triglyceride lowering. That includes the Bridge trial from our good friend and colleague, Brian Bergmark. Yeah, exactly. We're definitely going to have him on in an upcoming episode to discuss the trial and the drug in more detail. And that drug is olezarsen. Olezarsen also has a FCS trial called Balance. That's familial chylomicronemia syndrome, very rare genetic condition. These patients have recurrent pancreatitis and very difficult, low quality of life, and lowering TGs in them can be very helpful. So that'll be presented at a session shortly thereafter. So really excited for those prevention sessions. Then I'm going to attend some debates on kind of common lipid and genetics clinical questions that I'm excited about as well. And then I got to fly out Sunday night, get back for Monday clinic.
That's right, and maybe you can start talking about some of these new therapies in clinic, even if they're not ready for clinical use yet. We'll know about whether they might be on the horizon. Well, I mean, I think we could probably keep going on and on and on about all of the potential clinical trials of interest, but we should probably wrap it up there. So we're excited to see all of you in Atlanta. This is going to be really an awesome ACC Scientific Sessions. And as we said at the beginning, don't forget to come to the Timmy booth, which is booth 1940 on Sunday at 11 a.m. to meet the podcasters. We're incredibly thrilled to meet all of you. And so for the Timmy Talks podcast, this is David and Nick signing off.
Thanks for listening. The Timmy Talks podcast is hosted by Dr. David Berg and Dr. Nick Marston and produced by Kate Brennan. Like and follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, and follow us on LinkedIn and X @Timmy Study Group to be informed about podcast news and upcoming episodes.